So before we start analyzing games and figuring out which games we're going to look at and start looking at data, we have to decide, we have to know some things about hypotheses and good questions. And so in statistics, the whole question that we have here is that we have this whole population. This is every piece of data that's out there. And we want to know a certain thing about a certain parameter. So this might be like the average game length, or the win rate, or the kill-death ratio. So we're not going to just look at the whole population. We're going to take a sample of our whole population, and we're going to look at just that idea in the sample. And so this is statistics. We only want to look at a few and get a big idea of what the whole population is like. So one thing about hypothesis is we will be making some assumptions or hypotheses, and we want to show whether they're true or not. So the way we do this is we always first start with a null hypothesis. And so this null hypothesis means we're kind of giving them the benefit of the doubt. So I used to play StarCraft a lot. I'm going to use a lot of StarCraft examples. Like one example of a null hypothesis is that the win percentage of a person from a certain league is the same as the win percentage from other leagues. That would be the null hypothesis because we are assuming that they would have the same win percentage. Now, through the testing, what can happen is we can actually find that no, this isn't true. And what we do is we reject the null hypothesis and we go with an alternative. And so we check out some statistics here, and we either accept or reject this hypothesis here. And so before we even begin, we don't even want to look at the data yet. We just want to set up two hypotheses. This way, when you're looking back at the results, we don't change what we're thinking along the way. That would be unfair. So there are a few things that we need to go through, like the types of data. There are two types of data, quantitative and categorical. So number of value, that might be something like the kill-death ratio. That might be something like APM, actions per minute. This might be like game length. We can assign numbers to them. We can figure out those numbers. Categorical, this might be different. This might be like roles if you play like League of Legends or Dota or World of Warcraft. So it doesn't have an order or value. There's no number involved, but there are some labels that we could attach. So we're going to mostly spend our time with quantitative data, but you might encounter this. Sampling methods. You have to decide this. Simple random is if we have our population and we just randomly start picking people out of the whole population. Systematic is more like we have a bunch of people here and we decide we're going to just pick every every third one, and so on like that. And so this is actually easier when you have like a database of players. You could just go to a certain database and just pick every third player. So it's not random, but you're going to get a pretty good sample because it's systematic. You aren't deciding which ones to pick. And the convenient sample is if you just take whatever is most convenient. So ideally we want to get a simple random, but a lot of times we can go systematic, or we could just conveniently pick what we want. So for example, I have here a little database that is looking at 1v1 American players, and I'm in StarCraft 2, and I'm sorting it so that it's Grandmasters. And so I just have in this database a list of Grandmaster players. And so this, if I just took the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, if I just took like the first 10, that would be a convenient sample. And it would probably do a pretty good job for me. It's probably giving me what I want to know. If I did random, what I might do is I might say this is player 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and have a random number generator pick 3 of them or 4 of them. Systematic, I might just choose every other one. So there's a couple ways to pick my data that way. When you're doing your project, when you're doing your research and your analysis, you want to address this, because sometimes if you do one of these, like simple random or systematic, you might get certain results based on what you choose here. Alright, so for example, we're going to set up a hypothesis. Example 1, Grandmasters, ST2 players, APM versus Platinum APM. So StarCraft is organized into, StarCraft is organized into a couple different leagues. If you look up here, it goes Bronze, Silver, Gold, Platinum, Diamond, Master, Grandmaster. And so the question that we might be asking here is, do the players that are Grandmasters have a significantly different APM than Platinum? And so in my example here, I'm looking at APMs here. This is actions per minute. Now I'm seeing like 280 or 190. If I go to Platinum, we're choosing just a middle league here. I want to know if that's going to be significantly different. And just looking at the numbers here, it's pretty different for the numbers I do get. Which, by the way, 0 APM doesn't make any sense. So in this example, you might actually want to avoid the ones where there isn't an answer. It's probably just we don't know the number here. But anyways, these are probably on average a little lower, but we have some that are about the same. And so the hypothesis, the null hypothesis that we set up would be there is no significant difference. Okay? And that's what we're going to test. So later on you're going to see some videos on how you would actually set up a test to test that statistically. But you always should set up an alternative hypothesis that the APM is significantly different. And so we have a feeling that these would be different looking at looking at a few of the APMs, but we would actually have to find an average and compare it using one of our tests. So that's an example of how you should be setting up a hypothesis. Here they're assuming you're giving the benefit of the doubt they are the same. Here you're saying there is a difference. And so what happens is, if I test and find that this cannot be true, we throw that one out, and then we have to conclude that they are different. Okay, so another example that we could do here is like APMs between races in StarCraft. StarCraft has 3 different races: Terran, Protoss, Zerg. And if I sort here, there might be a reason, there might be a correlation between Terran and APM and Zerg and APM. So Terran had about 100, and Zerg has some higher ones, but it's actually probably on average about 100. So the hypothesis here would be Terran and Zerg have similar average APMs. And that's what I would test. I would see, are they really similar? If they're not significantly different, then we would just assume they have the same. We wouldn't reject this. But if we do end up rejecting it, we have to set up an alternative. So we would just say that Terran and Zerg have significantly different average APM. Okay, so to run quickly over what we've talked about already. We talked about how we should be picking a small sample and finding a statistic from that to prove our statement. And this is what you'll be setting up in your form. There's a couple different kinds of data. So if I use quantitative or categorical, you know what that is. Sampling methods, you guys should be able to address this and decide which ones you want to do. And then we went through some examples of setting up hypotheses. Alright, so your job now is to go to the Google form, create your teams, fill out the form, and make sure that you have come up with a hypothesis that we're okay with.